we'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 Public Work Session. Can we have a roll call, Ms. Burns?
Mr. Parentano?
Present.
Mr. Allen?
Present.
Mrs. Bowman? Here. Ms. Boyle? Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Present.
Mr. Kovitz is absent with prior notice. Mr. Marrington?
Here.
Mr. Cirillo?
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan is also absent with prior notice. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you all stand for a pledge of allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to the meeting, the board met in an executive session this evening to discuss matters of employment, issues related to labor relations, the purchase of or lease of real property, matters related to litigation, and matters related to school safety and security. Dr. McGee, would you present your superintendent's report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Parentano. The board will find the enrollment report for March in board docs. There's nothing exceptional on that. Actually, enrollment's actually up a little bit. And then, secondly, a report on our academic models. As of Monday, our elementary enrollment, as far as students choosing to come to school, has returned to the level of pre-Thanksgiving. So we have approximately 13% of our students at the elementary level, K through 4, their parents choosing to keep them home on remote. So we've returned to that level at the elementary school. Middle school continues to move in the direction with more kids in school, and the high school's stable. 40+% choosing to learn from home. Parents have till Friday, I'll remind them in an email this week, to set their academic model at the secondary level for the remainder of the year. So we continue to move in that direction to return students to school 5 days a week on April 5th. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Irwin, who's going to present a plan to accelerate our long-term facilities renovations goals. Mr. Irwin?
Thank you, Dr. McGee. And thank you to the Board of Education for this opportunity to share with you an opportunity that I believe that is before the district. Mr. Stanley, if you put a presentation on the screen, and if you wish to the board, you could either look at the big screen, if we can get that up there, or follow along on board docs. Let's get my little thing on. Let's get to the beginning. Accelerating the long-range facility plan. And those who don't know me, my name is Don Irwin. I'm the business manager of the school district. And I believe there's an opportunity that's present before us to accelerate what we call the long-range facility plan. And there's three things that we really have to take into consideration. The needs of the district improvements are greater than what we have currently funded in the general fund, in our general fund budget. The cost of debt today is at or near all-time lows, so there's an opportunity there. We have a $1 million budgetary line item in our general fund budget to fund capital improvements. And at just round numbers, if we would issue a $10 million bond today, that cost would approximately equate to $600,000 a year. And so in this proposal that I'm making tonight, that $600,000 would come out of the $1 million budgetary line item, and we'd be able to accelerate some projects that I want to go over with you. But knowing that we're having a bond issue, I've invited with us tonight Zach Willard from PFM, who's with us via Zoom here to my left on camera, and with him is Brian from RBC to talk about what this debt issue, how this would work, and what these opportunities are existing in the bond market. Brian, would you want to take it from here?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Don. So, yeah, Zach's here and Brian's also here with me. So, Don and Steve, tell us just since we can't see the setup, if I share my screen, will you all be able to see it clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so let me share my screen. I'll pull up a handout here. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to walk through a handout again to talk about what Don just mentioned, which is funding $10 million, thereabouts worth of capital projects. We're going to give you a market update, and then we're also going to talk about a refinancing opportunity that the district has in the near term. So walk through this. Feel free to jump in and ask questions if you have them so we can make this as useful as possible. So this chart might look familiar from past presentations, but it's an interest rate chart that we follow in the municipal world. It's the 10-year benchmark municipal rate. And when you look at this middle chart, I think you can all see my mouse scrolling around. This goes back to the early 90s. We're over here on the far right. You can see that big spike. That was when COVID set in just about a year ago. And since then, interest rates have bounced around all-time lows. There was a recent spike, as you can see, when I scroll down here to the bottom, just in the last 2 weeks. Maybe Brian can quick tell us about that. But all in all, rates are still at good levels.
Yeah, Zach had said, and Don had alluded to, it's obviously an exceptionally accommodative time for refundings or new money. We saw a little bump up in rates, obviously with the positive virus news, and there were some concerns about inflation. We saw just a little higher bump up in rates in the taxable market, and tax exempts really moved in sympathy with the taxable market. But just real quick, in those regards, really the technical factors in the tax exempt market are fantastic. There is absolutely positively no supply out there in the asset class, nor does the visible supply look like we're going to see a bump up in it. And that's good for the school district because, a lot of these funds and institutions that have money coming back to them need to put the money back in the tax exempt market. And although we saw a small bump up in rates, as Zach alludes to on that chart there, rates have been higher 97% of the time. So although we did see a small bump up in rates, it is an incredibly, incredibly accommodative time for any new money projects or refinancings.
Yeah, so this lines up well with the refinancing opportunity because we're going to enter the first possible time you've been able to refinance your 2016 bonds. And then at the same time, it appears that you're working on these capital projects that Don's referring to. So this is a bullet point page. I'm not going to walk through this entire thing. Some of this is just meant to be leave behind in case you can't sleep tonight or you want to remember what we talked about. But basically, the top part talks about interest rates are at all-time lows, but have come off the low. In the middle, under item number 2, it talks about the plan for this calendar year, as we see it now, is to potentially fund a bit, just shy of 10 million of capital projects. Okay, that's bullet point A. And then to refund the 2016 bond issue, which becomes callable. So it's the first time we've been able to refinance it, August 15th of this year. Okay. And what that means is you can actually lock in interest rates on that here in the next month to meet that August 15th call date. And the one key to this plan, the way that we're setting it up now, is to keep both of these bond issues what's called bank qualified. And if you've been on the board for a little while, you've heard us talk about that, in the past, 10 years from time to time. And when we can keep your bond issues bank qualified, it's beneficial to the district. Okay, you get better interest rates typically, and you get a shorter call feature, which is why you're able to come back and refinance it. For example, your 2016 bonds were bank qualified, so they had a 5-year call feature, which is why we're talking about this refinancing. If you do a non-bank qualified transaction, it typically has an 8 or a 10-year call feature. So you just get to refinance it less over its life. So when possible, we like to do bank qualified transactions. When it's not possible, then, we don't do it. But here it is. The savings on the 2016 bond, it is not as exciting as what we did last year, when we saved 10 million on that refinancing. That was a total home run, grand slam. This is more nominal. It already has low interest rates on it. The average rate is about a 2.4%, and we can lower that and save, somewhere in the neighborhood. Right now, it's about $300,000. Okay, so it's still meaningful savings, just not quite in the $1 million. So I'll pause real quick. Is there any questions so far? Okay, this page is just a snapshot, the review of your debt. So the top half is your gross debt service. So over in column 8, that's the number that would appear in your budget. All right, and it's broken into these different bond issues. And then the bottom half is what we call the local effort. That's net of the reimbursement that you get from the state. Okay, so that ties back to your budget. And then in column 13, you'll see your 2016 bonds. Those are the ones we're going to refinance. We're going to keep the same term that they already have, just simply lower the interest rate to save the money. And that's column 13. And so this page here is kind of the main page. So what this page does is it lines up this borrowing to fund the projects and the refinancing, okay? So if you start in column 5, that's your existing debt. If you do nothing, those are your payments in column 5. And then in the blue, columns 1 and 6, that would be the new borrowing that would fund about 10 million of projects. And if you scroll down to column 6, as Don had mentioned before, that adds about $600,000 to your debt service line item. So you'd start in column 5, you would add column 6. And then what we're showing you in column 7 is the refinancing, which is scheduled to take place second. It's kind of a second step. And in column 7, as I mentioned, right now that saves just about $300,000. If we did this today, we'd probably be north of that. There's a little bit of cushion built in here. So you can see that at the bottom of column 7. So then when all the dust settles, you'd have 10 million for projects, and your new debt service would fit into column 8, which shows you go from column 5 to column 8, which is about a $9.2 million number going forward. And as Don mentioned, I think you have about $1 million line item in your budget, so this fits within this. Okay. So that's the numbers. Any question about that? This is the summary page. We didn't want to bore you with all the backup. And then the last page here that we'll hit on is an estimated timeline of events, okay, on page 5. So when you look at this, we're planning to have the meeting tonight, which here is March 9th. We did have the credit rating interview yesterday with Moody's to talk about the refinancing and the potential new money. And then what's scheduled is for March 23rd, the legal team will be back to present you with the actual debt resolution for approval. Okay, and the debt resolution will take care of both the new projects and the refinancing projects. And if you remember from past, versions of this, once you pass that, that's the kind of the board action needed so that we can finish the process with the credit rating agencies and all the documents, and then we can hop into the market when we're all ready to go and we don't need to come back and do anything else at the board level. So it leaves the team flexible for kind of the market fluctuations that you saw on that interest rate chart. And we're expecting March 25th to be able to lock in interest rates should you want to move forward with the new money. Okay, so fairly soon, it's about a little over 2 weeks away. And then, as I said, we need to separate the refinancing in order to keep it bank qualified. Federal tax law requires a 15-day separation. Don't ask me who picked 15 days, but that's the rule. So the second step is then scheduled for about just over 15 days later, April 13th. So, all in all, about a month from today, you can have the interest rates locked on both of these, realize the refinancing savings, and then be on your way to complete these projects with your new money funding.
Zach?
So Don, I don't know if I missed anything. If there's any other questions, Brian and I are happy to answer them.
Zach?
Yes, sir.
That's Steve Paratano.
Hi, Steve.
How are you? In the past, we've used a bond resolution that allowed a lot of flexibility to our bond representatives to make the best deal on the rate market. Are we going to use a similar resolution this time?
Exactly. You're remembering exactly right, just like we did last year and like we've done for as long as I can remember, going back to the financial crisis. The parameters resolution, which would be on March 23rd, that is that flexible resolution that you're remembering, Steve. So that then allows us to kind of get into the market on the right day, as opposed to having to come back at your next regularly scheduled board meeting to lock in the rates. So once we do that on the 23rd, then Don and the financing team can kind of get all the rest of this wrapped up and kind of hit the market at the right time, hopefully. And if for some reason the market would shift and move away from us, which is a possibility, we can hit the pause button, so especially on the refinancing, because if markets go higher and we're no longer saving at least 2% of the refunded debt, which is about 156,000, we would likely hit the pause button and not move forward with that transaction until rates would either come back, or if they never come back, we would just keep it on the shelf.
That was my next question, that the rates, the way they've just been fluctuating lately because of a lot of noise in the market, may not settle by the end of the month. And you have
Right.
that 15-day window between those two issues. We have enough money in the reserve to carry us if we wanted to start the projects without actually receiving the bond money. I know it's always questionable about how long you wait to pull the trigger to enter the market, but I want to make sure that you take advantage of the timeline and the flexibility that we have on our end, that we could get, worst case scenario, we could get the project started without the bond, but of course we'd like to secure it first.
Exactly. No, you're right about that, and if we would hit a situation where, you see some sort of a strange thing happens in the market and we do need to hit the pause button and wait a few weeks, you can always reimburse yourself with the borrowed proceeds to the extent that you used cash from your general fund to start the project. So that's a good point.
Thank you, Zach.
Yep, no, thank you. So any other questions about the numbers or the timing? There's one last thing I'm just going to mention, which will kind of transition back to Don, but also into the meeting on the 23rd. So the number that you're going to see in that debt resolution and the number that will be advertised in the paper, if you remember when we do these, as Steve just referred to it, the very flexible resolution, the number is always about 20% higher than what we're actually going to issue. So for this example, the new money piece is going to read $12 million, even though we're only going to borrow you enough to get about $10 million of spendable proceeds, okay? And then the second piece of it, which is the refinancing, it's the same type of situation where the number is artificially inflated for state law purposes in the advertisement and the resolution, but in reality, we're only going to refinance the debt as long as we can save at least that $155,000. But like I said, right now, we're about double that if we were to do this today. So I just want to mention that so that when you see the resolution at your meeting on the 23rd, that you're not surprised. So with that, I'll kick it back to Don unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you, Brian. These gentlemen have it.
We appreciate you moving us up in the agenda. Thank you for that.
Yeah, these gentlemen have another school board meeting to go to this evening, so we thank them for their time here this evening to share with us what their expertise on the bond market. If we can go back to the presentation, Mr. Stanley.
All right, I'm going to unshare here. Okay. All right, take care, everyone.
Thank
We'll
you.
see soon.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
So as I mentioned in the first slide, the needs are greater than the resources available, and this comes from our long-range facility plan prepared by Mr. Traska and viewed by the facilities plan, the facilities committee. And as you can see, if you just take into consideration the 21-22 totals, and they're very similar to the totals we've had in the past years, you have about $1 million to fund these projects. You have about $3 million in any given year in need, and this is how you have deferred maintenance on your facilities. You tackle what you can, and you kick the can down the road for the projects in the years to come, hoping that the situation gets better. And by accelerating this, I think we can strike at this and get this back under control, at least better from where we're at today. It's just an overview here. Many people don't realize we have one high school, we have 3 middle schools, we have 6 elementary buildings, we have 2 elementary facilities that we own and lease to the Bucks County Intermediate Unit, and we have a facilities building at the high school. And with those total, we have 1.3 million square feet of operating facilities. And you can think about, you know, we're not, right now, we don't have $1 per square foot in a budget for capital improvements. And so we have to work together to get that line item higher so that we can, after this is over, that we can continue to have this kind of spending available each and every year for the facilities because they require it. And so the district has been keenly focused since I arrived 2 years ago. The board has been working very diligently with the administration on the long-range facility plan. And just to recap, we're trying to identify large capital projects needed to keep the facilities up to date, and we categorize them as roofs, HVAC systems, paving, significant projects that we have throughout the schools, and fields. And the fields have come up recently, and they're their own subject, and there'll be their own discussion later on in the coming months, as we were out on the fields today in review of that next phase of this improvements to our facilities. And just to recap what we've done with that line item, we have recently completed, within the last few years, a hallway roof at Albert Schweitzer Elementary for $240,000. You see the next two line items, different roofs at the high school, one at $700,000, one at $600,000. Carl Sandburg Tech Ed Wing A at $500,000. Walter Miller Area B for $180,000. HVAC projects, we had Maple Point rooftop done at $275,000. Recently did a rooftop at the high school for $200,000. We just completed the library dehumidification project at the high school for $377,000. And we had a Carl Sandburg rooftop unit done last summer for $285,000. And the paving projects we recently completed, we did the lower playground at Pearl Buck for $21,000 and the upper playground for $30,000. At Fertibar, we did general repairs for $11,000 and a playground area for $50,000. At Hoover, we repaved the playground area on the left for $70,000. At Maple Point here, we did the right-hand drive along the gymnasium for $40,000. At the high school, we did some of the front drive for $43,000 and the rear drive by the student parking for $50,000. At Pequesson, we did the side and rear exit lots for $20,000 and the big lot on the left-hand side of the building for $80,000. In addition, at Pequesson, we also did the right drive along the gymnasium for $40,000, and at Schweitzer, we did the rear lot for $53,000. And as you can see, we're trying to make improvements in each of the areas of our community, each of our areas of our schools, as best we can with the resources that we have available. And the projects that we've completed that are outside of those areas, we did the bleacher repairs at the high school for $340,000. We repaired an elevator by the library for $340,000. At Maple Point, we did bathroom renovations for $80,000. At Pequesson, we did the pool drain repairs for $40,000 and the outside wall repairs at $65,000. At Sandburg, we updated the auditorium bathrooms for $40,000. And I want to make sure that everybody knows and remembers that we updated the entrances to all the schools. That cost us $500,000 to ensure safety and security so that when visitors come in, they're coming into a secure vestibule and don't have access to the free hand of the school to roam around. So how do we accelerate the plan? Well, I think we've got that pretty much understood now, that we would issue a $10 million bank qualified bond to address the many needs of the district. We have in excess of $6 million in roofing projects that we can address, as well as some other deferred maintenance issues. And if you just give me 3 more minutes, we'll go over those. We have the maintenance in the bus garage. As you can see, the warranty on that roofing project ended in 2015. These are commercial roofs. The warranty is always 20 years, so that you know that roof was installed in 1995. So you've gotten an additional 6 years of life out of it. That needs to be replaced at $830,000. In addition to facilities and purchasing, facility on that site, the warranty ended in 2016. We're estimating a budgetary figure of somewhere around $700,000. The high school, we've identified 2 different areas that the warranty ended in 2015 at $450,000. At Walter Miller, we're going to take care of areas B, G, H, L, and M, and that's typically the areas that aren't pitched. There are some pitched roofs on that facility. Again, that roof went down in 1995. That's going to cost $1.2 million. Bequesting area D in the center and E at the end, D at the end. The warranties ended in 2013. We have $350,000 and $290,000 estimated cost. We have the Schweitzer warehouse roof. If you know of Schweitzer, there's a large area over there that we use for warehousing. The warranty ended in 2008. There'd be an additional $400,000 to fix that roof. We have Sandberg Tech. We already addressed Wing A. Now we have Wing B and C that we're looking at. Warranties ended in 2008. We have those estimated costs of $660,000 and $550,000. And the last one that we've recently added to this list was the high school library wing. After discussions, the roof has just come out from under warranty. We've invested a lot of money into the dehumidification project. We want to get this roof redone, and that would cost us $850,000, we're estimating. So that's the roofs of excess of $6.3 million. In addition to that, we have these projects that we would like to accelerate. We have elevators that need to be completely overhauled in Pequesing and Maple Point at $350,000 apiece. We have the Pequesing chiller at $300,000 to ensure that the air conditioning is working properly. We have a fuel oil tank at the Neshaminy High School that has been recently inspected and is in need of replacement for $400,000. We have the new boilers for Lower South estimated at $350,000. These are steam boilers. I believe when I looked at it, they were installed in 1994. And I believe that they have now begun to leak and identified a need to repair. And these two go together. The Maple Point HVAC, this would be new unit ventilators at Maple Point, as well as a DDC controls for Maple Point for the unit ventilators, get away from the pneumatics and into the direct digital controls. We've estimated that at $800,000 for the unit ventilators and $750,000 for the DDC controls. So we have a schedule, particularly as it relates to the roofs. We had return site visits we completed yesterday on that. We have proposals due from contractors on Tuesday, March 16th. Administratively, we would evaluate those bids on Tuesday, March 23rd. We would look for a decision by the administration to the school board on Tuesday, April 13th, and looking for approval then on the April board meeting on April 27th. And then commencement of the projects would begin right after school would be out of approximately mid-June. So the next step we would ask the board is that at your next meeting, you would approve the bond issuance of the resolution to incur the debts, and that would give us the green light to begin these projects. Any questions?
As this proposal has been widely discussed at the facilities meeting and,
Yes.
and the finance meeting. As far as the bond issue goes, is that final presentation been made to the finance committee yet?
No, I don't believe this was the presentation to the committee of the whole, instead of
Okay.
to the finance committee.
That's the way. Okay, I have no issue with that.
Okay.
That's fine. One of the projects you mentioned were the boilers at Lower South. That is a lease school. If you could just take a moment to explain to the public why that's on the list of things that need to be done and how the compensation works on that project.
Yes, I discussed that with the attorney Trente before we got to this point. That building, while we own it, we lease it operationally to the Bucks County Intermediate Unit. But per the terms of the lease, there is a percentage that would be required for us to pay on that new boiler, as well as a percentage that would be paid by the lessee, Bucks County Intermediate Unit. And depending on how many years we're into the lease, depends on what the percentage is. Initially, it was I forget what it was initially, but right now, they would be on the hook for 30% of the cost of that, the number that you saw here this evening. And we would be responsible for 70% of that. So I showed you the entire budgeted costs, but we would only be responsible for 70% of that.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the board?
Thank you very much. Dr. McGee, I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. So to sum it up, the house needs some repair. We've been trying to repair as we have the money on hand, and we're falling behind. So while money is easy to borrow and not that expensive, we're asking to borrow and get ahead of the projects so we can keep the house in order.
And I'll wait for Mr. Irwin to take his seat to answer the question. But as he explained, we're using this to offset future costs, and we're going to, the bond isn't increasing our budget because we're going to use our budgetary line item to pay the cost of the bond. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. All right, we're going to move on to our, excuse me? Yes. We're going to move on to public comment. Do we have any signups?
There were no signups, but I don't know if, I think there's some people that were.
If you want to speak, approach the podium. Hit the button to speak. You have 3 minutes. Please give us your name, the area in which you live, and your occupation. And please, no personal attacks. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? My name is Diane Lagler. This is my husband, Robert Lagler, and we're in Langhorne. Our son goes to Maple Point. I am a restaurant manager, and my husband has his own insurance company. And first of all, I want to thank you for everything you do every day for us, and I know where my taxes are going, so thank you very much for that. But we're here to just discuss the spring sports for the children coming up, and we just wanted to ask from you to really kind of think about the children, the spring sports coming up, and having them play, you know, baseball, basketball, whatever they need to play, because they've gotten so many things taken away from them so far. And, you know, they're constantly on a computer all day, and they really need to go out with their social skills, you know, for their mental capacity, for the students, and, you know, for the families too, just to be together, to watch their kids play sports. It's really important to the parents. You know, we found out about the meeting like today at 4 o'clock, and I did have some people send you some things via email, but we're just pleading with you to please let the kids play spring sports. And my husband actually is from Langhorne, you know, third generation, and he played for Neshaminy High School too for baseball. So he'll have a few things to say.
Yeah, hi guys. Like she said, I just think it's really important for the kids to have that experience, to be outdoors. You know, the transmission rate outdoors among kids seems to be very, very low. We're just asking that, you know, they've had so much taken away from them in the last 2 years, year and a half. We'd really just like them to be able to play sports if it's available. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And just normally we wait to the end of the meeting and comment, but just real quickly, I'll say that subject matter consumed a large amount of the board's executive session discussion today. There are many complicating factors, and we are aware of it. We're trying to formalize a solution. At this time, I can't tell you whether it's a yay or a nay, but it's on our docket to get done. Do you need to add to that, Dr. McGee, or are you good with that?
No, I think you summed it up rather well. So presently, we have athletics and co-curricular athletics at the high school. We limit the gathering, et cetera. It's a matter of logistically expanding that to 3 other locations with the personnel, involving extra transportation. High schoolers tend to get themselves around, whereas middle schoolers don't. So we're working through that. We understand the concern. We hear you. Our goal is to not shut down our schools accidentally by trying to expand. So we need a few more weeks. Hopefully the numbers continue to improve. Hopefully we are at a point to be able to do that in the spring. That is our goal. If not our traditional program, some form of it to get them out and participating.
So with that, you know, with every problem, there needs to be a solution. And, you know, as you said, I think the numbers would go up more if the students were able to play sports, first of all. And secondly, with transportation, you know, I've talked to all these parents and, having them sign off on, they have to get their own way to, go to the field and leave the field. And we as parents will do that for our children because that's all we really care about is them. And we care about all of you too. And talking to, some of the baseball coaches and everything, they want to do this for the children too. So I know you're doing everything that you possibly can, and I understand that. But, we will do our part also. And, I would love to help you with anything with that too.
Thank you for your time. There's no other sign-ups. Is there anyone in the audience wish to approach the podium? Seeing none, we're going to move on. That'll bring us to Section 2, our action items for this evening. I'm going to ask for a master motion for item 2.02, certificated appointments, 2.03, certificated tenure awards, 2.04, certificated leaves of absences, 2.05, certificated returns of leave, 2.07, support staff appointments, 2.08, support staff leaves of absence, and 2.09, support staff leaves, revised leaves of absence. A motion's been made. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hollenbach. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this master motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 7-0. That'll bring us to action item 2.01, which I will read. Administrative retirement, resignations, and ends of assignments. Be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the following retirements, resignations for administrative tasks. Tom Magdalinskis, assistant principal at Neshaminy High School, resignation. Motion's been made on 2.01. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cirillo. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, I just want to make a record that Mr. Magdalinskis has served this district for almost 30 years. He will be surely missed, and we wish him well in whatever endeavor brings him next. Hearing that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Marrington, 2.06, please.
Okay, 2.06, certificated retirement, resignation, end of assignment. Resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the following retirement, resignation, end of assignments for certified staff. There are 5 names on the list, 2 of whom have been served the district for over 30 years. Kimberly Matai, 31.6 years, and Diane Rose, who's been with us for 35 years. And we'd just like to congratulate them on their retirement and wish them good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Marrington. Motion's been made on 2.06. May I have a second? Second by Mrs. Boyle. Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Allen, could you read 2.10, please?
Thank you, Mr. Bertano. 2.10, motion on the floor, support staff, retirement, resignation, end of assignment. Resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the following retirement, resignation, or end of assignments for support staff. There are 3 names on our list, and I'd just like to draw attention to Renette Mohop, who has 35 years with us here in the district, and we wish her well in her retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. A motion's been made on 2.10. May I have a second? Second by Mrs. Hollenbach. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 7-0. That'll bring us to 2.11. Mrs. Bowman, please.
I'd like to make a motion for 2.11 co-curricular appointments. Be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the following appointments for certificated and support staff, subject to the following conditions. 1, in the event the activity is canceled for any reason, including acts of God, or pursuant to any order by the governor or Pennsylvania Secretary of Health, prior to the commencement, the coach and/or advisor will receive no compensation, and/or, number 2, in the event that the activity has commenced and then canceled for any reason, including acts of God or pursuant to any order by the governor of Pennsylvania or the Pennsylvania Secretary of Health, the coach and/or advisor shall receive pro rata compensation for the period of services rendered. And there are 30 appointments on the list.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. A motion's been made on 2.11. May I have a second? Second by Mrs. Hollenbach. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 7-0. This moves us on to Section 3. Items for approval are in next public meeting. Items currently for approval are in next public meeting are 3.01 budget transfers, 3.02 Sunday facility usage, 3.03 acceptance of the 2019-2020 audit report, 3.04 out-of-district placements, 3.05 first reading of policy, 3.06 revised 2020-2021 school calendar, 3.07 BCIU number 22, 2021-22 program and services and instructional materials and research services budget, 3.08 amendment to the Bucks County Technical High School Articles of Agreement, 3.09 amendment to the 403B retirement plan, and they will be on our agenda for our next public meeting, which I believe is March 23rd. 7 o'clock in this auditorium. That will bring us to number 4, our committee reports. Business operations, Mrs. Hollenbach.
Our next business operations meeting is Monday, March 22nd, in the Maple Point Conference Room at 6:30. We will be talking about the budget and all these other fun things that we discussed today with the bond and other things like that. Everybody is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Educational development, Mrs. Bowman.
Our next educational development meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, March 16th at 6:30 p.m. here at Maple Point. The agenda items will include instructional models, updates for plans A through D, comprehensive planning overview, summer programs, summer professional development plans, and curriculum and instruction initiatives update, which has been ongoing. And that's open to the public.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowman. For right now, I'm going to skip facilities and move to policy. Mrs. Boyle, please.
The next policy meeting is going to be held on Thursday, May the 6th, in the district boardroom, and all are welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Mr. Sullivan isn't here this evening due to another obligation, so I'm going to take over his facilities and planning presentation. Just yesterday, March 8th, the Facilities Committee met where we had a presentation from Site IQ Logic on a assessment of Pearl Buck Elementary School. And at this particular time, to get us started, I'd like Dr. McGee to add some commentary, and if we have the slide presentation on the objectives that you discussed with Site IQ Logic and the reasoning why, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you, Dr. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Parentano. So over the past month or so, Mr. Devlin, Ms. Burkhalter, and I sat down and with the goal of if we were going to renovate Buck, what would it look like and how would it last us for the next 20 to 30 years? So, Mr. Stanley, if we can get the PowerPoint. So that is Pearl S. Buck Elementary School, built in 1968. I attended in 1970 to 1974, if anyone's interested. The building is basically a two-story building. There are 3 circles and a square that sit on top of each other. So we sat down and decided what would it need to look like to meet our present educational programming and what is best now in 2020s. So we took a look at each wing, and this particular wing is the lower level, the A wing, where it's kindergarten and first grade, 1 circle and 1 square. And that area in the center there, it's the music suite and some other areas. And our redesign of that, now the classrooms are wonderful. They're large, they're a little strangely shaped, but they are sufficient. And surprisingly, the makeup of the building presents itself to some common area. So the design would be to remove all the walls around here and give that a common area space. So those of you who've been through Tawanka, the pod idea, so this becomes the A pod, and we move all this stuff out to elsewhere. So we're displacing, for those following along, a music classroom and some other areas. We move upstairs, sorry. Over here we have the art room and the C wing. Same thing, make that a common area between them, more open space, and just take down those walls, redo all the classrooms, and move the music or the arts room, which is there. Over here is the library, which is kind of open now, but we'd make that more open, again, displacing the library. So that gives us the pod feel of what is when you design a new school now. So there's common area, common instructional space, and it's more of a community. Those of you who walked Buck, you really can't see around that corner. You're walking in 3 large circles. So that being said, we've just displaced a whole bunch of things. So when you look at the educational design of the building, my apologies, we've displaced the library. We're going to call that a media center. We need that somewhere else. Not that long ago, we added one to Miller. That would be the sample. We displaced an art room and a music room. We've built them in Tawanka. That would be the sample. And we've displaced the nurses' suite in that common area as well. And then looking at the building in the future, right now it houses about 550 kids. The future should house 700 to 750. House is probably a bad word. I probably should come up with a different service, that many kids. 1, for space, and 2, to bring some special programs that deserve to be within their home school. So that would be the new space needed at Pearl Buck to make it go for the next few decades. In doing that, we asked our friends at Site Logic as to how they do that. Here's one option. Unfortunately, the 3 circles and a square went well until you tried to add another square. So this is one option they had with the access hallway. We didn't get into the details of what's inside that, other than it's a music suite, an art suite, a media center, and additional classrooms to the tune of 6 to 10. Another option is to put it over here, and none of them really stand out as ideal. There is that access hallway because of the nature of the building. Possibly on the front, but that kind of leaves us lacking space there between that family's pool and our school. So that didn't seem like a great idea either. So that's kind of what we went through. To make Buck a 20 to 30 year facility, this is what it would take to bring it up to what is being built now. That being said, from our friends at the engineering firm, it would take approximately 3 years, just less than 3 years to get this done. So if you take a look at the building, if you're going to renovate this area, you have to move all these classes somewhere. If you're going to renovate this area, to move all these classes somewhere. Unfortunately, this area sits on top of this area, and vice versa. So the idea of 3 years of this construction going on around a K through 4 program isn't very attractive. So how would it happen? Basically, we would have to, it is. I think Don did something to it. Can you give me the last slide, Chris? That's the first slide. That one. So those little yellow things on the right are portable classrooms, temporary classrooms. So to do this transition in swing space over 3 years, the company we'd have to build the new construction, the big squares, and house service students in portable classrooms over that period of time as we renovated the building. So the design is attractive. Fitting that extra square with the 2 circles and the other square doesn't come out very, very nice. And then the whole idea of 3 years under construction, and the design of the building doesn't allow us to move from one spot to another in that one of them are on top of each other. So that is the present status of renovating Pearl S. Buck Elementary School. Steve, did you want me to get into cost, or is that where you? So they said the building needs physical plant upgrades. I can't speak all that intelligently to it. The HVA system, except all this stuff has to be upgraded to the tune of $10 to $15 million. Then to do what I just described, we're in excess of 25, and it might even be higher than that because you haven't addressed the parking lot out front and a significant amount of, if you're familiar with Buck, there's a lot of earth there behind the built building as it goes up. So we estimated, I think we started yesterday just under 25, and by the time we finished the meeting, I think we were between 27 and 28, just as an estimate. So to bring Buck up to speed, it appears, as best we can tell, that it will take 3 years, somewhere just short of $30 million, and involving what we just talked about. Steve, anything else?
No, I think that pretty much brings us up. I just want to add some additional commentary. As far as what we're talking about doing at Buck, if we choose that is the right direction to go, is basically a rehab of the entire school. And that's what that school needs. That school was built in 1968. That school has never had any major renovations done to it. It's the only school that we have not touched in since we started the roadmap plan in 2013. The only thing that would be remaining at Pearl Buck when it was done, there's going to be the original foundation, the original walls, and what's inside those walls, including the building insulation, because it is a brick building, and unless you're going to take the classrooms apart and re-wall the classrooms, there's no way to increase the insulation. And at that point, that's really going to raise the price tremendously. So at this particular point, the discussion that the facilities committee had last night is to give a fair comparison, and what we've been talking about over the last few months is what would be the comparison of building new on this site, somewhere on this site, or a total rehab of Pearl Buck. Now, from an analysis, and Mr. Allen can probably speak a little bit more to this than I can, John was part of the original Citizens Committee on Consolidation that started in 2011, and did all the initial analysis on that building. We had done it again in 2014 when I was the chair of the Consolidation Committee for the board, and then I believe we looked at it one more time in 2019 because we knew it was coming time that something needs to be done at Pearl Buck. This discussion was actually supposed to start last year, but COVID upset the entire world, and we've, with the realization of what's going on in the bond markets and the attractiveness of borrowing now, the board's facility committee feels this is the right time to analyze these issues and bring them to the public for discussion and finally make a decision on Pearl Buck. Mr. Allen, if you want to add some commentaries, the physical conditions of the services at the building?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned a couple times when we've touched on this building, and we certainly discussed it multiple times in Facilities Committee. The building being built in 1968, there was a lot of, I've termed it experimental. That's not entirely correct, but I'll just say there were ideas. You can see the shape of the building. The physical plant, there were a lot of ideas as far as the chilling, HVAC, heating plant, all of which were modern and cutting edge at the time, but that's no longer the case. And some of those ideas didn't pan out so well. We mentioned a handful of times, it's trouble to get parts for them. So not to exhaust that subject entirely, the facility was one discussion. Then we came to our administration and Dr. McGee and Brian has said, well, how does the building work for you on an educational platform? And they came back with their recommendations of what they needed to knock that building into a shape that is suitable for a modern educational environment. That's where these numbers and these ideas came from, and that's where we're at the moment. You can see the cost started to escalate quickly. We began looking at not just, okay, can we rehab the building? What would it take to rehab the building? Well, it's going to take 3 years, then we will have children in that school. So how do we construct around them? That brought in the pods, the trailers, rental, and there's a cost involved in that. There's a cost involved in parking lot, construction. Anyway, I just want to get everyone an idea of where we're at with this and where these costs start coming in. They're euphemistically called soft costs, but they are actually hidden and they quickly expand into a program. And you're like, well, so we have been doing our due diligence in the facility committee to finally be able to say, okay, it's no longer conceptual. What we think we need to do, we needed some hard numbers as we presented tonight. Thank you.
And Mr. Cirillo, you had a comment that you wanted to add on last night's discussion?
Yeah, no, it's very eye-opening in terms of the amount of money that Pearl Buck is in need of. It was very interesting to hear all of it. I mean, it is a wonderful design, but the dollars started climbing rapidly for such an old building. So yeah, I mean, it's something that we definitely have to take a long, hard look at.
Thank you, Mr. Cirillo. As Dr. McGee mentioned, in the design proposal, or the analysis, I should say, it was not thought of to add the parking lot improvements that would be needed and also the traffic flow improvements that would be needed. So while the original estimate was about $24.6 million to do all the programmatic changes that the administration feels is necessary to bring the buildings up to the standards that we try and practice. And the more traditional buildings, not just comparing it to Tawanka, but when you look at Miller and you look at Schweitzer and you look at Hoover, they were built in either the late 50s or early 60s, and they used a more traditional layout. And that layout has proved to be very resilient. And while John mentioned the experimentation that was taking place in education in the late 60s and early 70s, and the design of these buildings changed, it kind of is going back to the fact that the way those buildings were designed in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it really tends itself better to the way that the rooms are situated, the connectivity of the hallways, how the teachers and staff can collaborate and interact with each other. And, in our analysis, that has really proven to be true. So in stating that, the whole front design of the building would have to change, we feel, based upon Mr. Kern's presentation along last night at the meeting. He spoke of the problems that they have. I believe that school, even though it's designed for a maximum of 550, I believe it has 590 in it right now. Am I correct? Or
It's between 550 and 6. You're catching me off guard. with that.
Right. It's
in my
actually got more
enrollment report.
students in that it's designed to handle. I see Mr. Mean shaking his head there in the background, yes. And the parent pickups and the drop-offs and the bus transportation. If we were to improve that school, and if that is what we are to do, there is going to have to be a change to the driveway, the drop-off zones, the bus zones. So, that will also, increase the cost, and that's where we ended up theorizing, realistically, when you're all said and done, you're going to be upwards of $27 million. The next discussion the board had was a presentation that we had from Spiesel Architecture, who is working on the concept that we started if we were to build it at this building. We asked him to design a schedule based upon when the board would like to hit the bond market for either project, whether we would fix and Pearl Buck or we would go new. It's going to require another bond. Our bond professionals who testified tonight in discussions with Mr. Irwin, feel that, sometime late in the year, early next year is going to be the best time to, if we were to go that way, to go out for a bond. In looking at all the things you would have to do between now and when you would get to a point where you could present a plan for board approval, one or the other, a schedule would have to start in April. So the discussion of the panel is to bring to the board, the full board next week, a proposal to engage with Spiesel Architecture to start some preliminary design phases that are in incremental steps, which means the board can stop them at any time. It's not a full commitment, so that we could get an actual better idea of what a new facility would cost so we can compare it against instead of a square footage estimate. Currently, we have a square footage estimate. It's just based upon a price per square foot. The last meeting that we had, it was presented, I believe, in excess of $40 million in today's dollars. Design has a lot to do with what the building would eventually cost. So that's the reason why the Facilities Committee is going to be recommending to the full panel that we do some more in-depth investigation so we can get a more accurate description and design, so we can get a pre-bid idea of what it would cost to do that, and that would make a very fair basis of comparison for the board to decide whether we're going to rehab Pearl Buck or we're going to move on to a new facility, hopefully at this location. And that's where we're at, and if anybody from the board has any questions, we'd be glad to entertain them at this time. All right, hearing none, we appreciate that. The administration will be working with the architectural group to come up with a motion for next meeting, and at that time, there will be a definitive motion that you'll have ahead of time in your board packets, so you'll be able to discuss when we make the motion of whether or not we want to, as a board, move in that direction. So thank you all for the extra time and explaining where we're at with the Pearl Buck project. That'll bring us to our representative reports. Mr. Cirillo, IU.
Yes, the Bucks County IU is actually continuing to work with state and county officials to help assist and aid in the implementation of hopefully vaccinating all of our teachers, support staff, and administration here in the next, hopefully beginning this week. It's been a strong coordinated effort that Dr. Hoffman and his team have been committed to, and hopefully we here at Neshaminy can start to, along with everybody else in the county, see good results for our educators and staff, because it is sorely needed for them. They are essential as anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cirillo. Mrs. Boyle, Neshaminy Education Foundation.
The Neshaminy Education Foundation Board met yesterday on Zoom, and they discussed finances and upcoming fundraisers. Neshaminy High School seniors are urged to apply for the NEF scholarship, which will be awarded in May. Our next meeting will be held on Monday, April 12th, and will be virtual. But information about joining the NEF and meetings can be found at their website, neshaminy.org/NEF.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyle. PSBA report, that's me. Basically, just piggybacking on Mr. Cirillo, the PSBA has been working for months with the governor's office and the state health department to find a way to accelerate vaccinations for our staff members. They were working with the governor's office in the move to move them from 1B to 1A, and now with the J&J vaccine being released, it looks like it's real now that the people that are looking in the 1A group to get vaccinated will be able to get vaccinated. I know Dr. McGee had sent out some literature earlier in the week about that. Can you just add to that on the progress of that vaccination program for staff?
Sure. Beginning tomorrow at 2 p.m., there are some 342 Neshaminy employees who are in the first wave to get the J&J vaccination. The county, through the leadership of Dr. Hoffman and his staff, have received in excess of 4,000. They're working actively with the state. I would go as far as to say they're helping lead the state with the Bucks County model. And there's a hope that shortly after or about the end of March, we'll be able to have offered the J&J vaccination to any employee that so desires to have it, which should help us with our reopening effort. It has been a amazing effort by the county and others to make sure that we can do this, and it all begins tomorrow.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. Mr. Allen, technical school, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Virtano. I have about 4 items to comment on. The Bucks County Joint Technical High School Joint Board met February 22nd. I believe that's the correct date, 7:30. Items that we discussed were Dr. Piskey advised that the plan was to move the students' population to 50% from the 25% model that occurred on March 1st. The capital improvements that we mentioned here that are being looked into, the update improvements for the roof, HVAC system upgrade, and fire suppression systems. We discussed contracting with UE Engineering to make a presentation to us, and that will be to the authority members, and that will be on March 2nd, 2021, to move that discussion further along. We reported that the audit report underwent an audit and there were no discrepancies found, which is always good news. And finally, I'd like to point out the Bucks County Technical High School applied for a waiver of the National Occupation Competency Testing Institute exams, much like last year, due to the severely reduced in-person instructional time due to our COVID-19 pandemic. Health and safety precautions. We have asked for a waiver. It is normally part of their graduation requirements, but this has been the trend through trade schools throughout the state. Bucks County is, as I said, they've applied for that waiver. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That'll bring us to our second public comment period. Is there anyone in the audience wishes to approach the podium for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to future topics. Does any board member have any future topics? That'll bring us to board comment. Dr. McGee, do you have any commentary this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Parentano. Traditionally, without a pandemic, at the next school board meeting, the board will approve, if they see fit, the adjusted school calendar, which we also set our planned graduation date. Once we get through the potential of inclement weather, let's hope that's done. And when we get back after spring break, that's when we'll begin to set the stage for those year-end events that everybody's asking for, including graduation, academic events, and those celebratory-like events. So we thank everyone for their patience. Once we get through this next couple weeks, get our kids back to school, hopefully 5 days a week on April 5, we will turn our attention to setting the stage for the end of the year. Thank you, Mr. Parentano.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. Our future board meetings on 3/16/2021, as mentioned, will be a educational development meeting, 6:30 in the Maple Point Board Meeting Room. Our next public meeting will be March 23rd, 7 o'clock in this auditorium. The next business operations meeting will be March 22nd, 6:30 in the district boardroom here at Maple Point, and the next facilities and planning meeting will be on the March 30th at 6:30 p.m., also in the district boardrooms here at Maple Point. I also want to remind the public that this meeting is being broadcast virtually, and if you want to log in, you can find that information at www.neshaminy.org/meetings on the evening of the meeting. So then, moving on to adjournment, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hollenbeck. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all very much for attending.